So, in today's lecture, we'll be discussing what I think is important for this year prelims. In the last few years, I've observed that a lot of candidates are ignoring some part of NCRT, especially from art and culture standpoint. Generally, when we approach art and culture, they don't tend to understand the underlying logic part and they just by heart the information. I'll be picking up I'm pretty sure a lot of you must not have seen this book at all from NCRT. How many of you know this book? Knowledge, Traditions and Practices of India. How many of you are aware that a book like this exists? Not a lot of you, right? So, previously, you had a government source called CCRT. That was quoted as the source for your art and culture. Apart from that, you have other traditional resources, but going forward, according to me, since this book came out a few years ago, there's a possibility that UPSC might pick up questions directly from this. And I don't want you to rely upon your memory alone to solve art and culture questions. If you take a look at the textbooks therein, you would not see the underlying logic. So the intent of this class, as far as this theme is concerned, is to help you understand the logic beneath the organization, or at least what is my interpretation of the logic that helps you in memorizing this information. I wanted to present it in front of you. With that intent, I'll be beginning this lecture. See, this NCRT has divided the entire culture syllabus into various heads: the dance, drama, music, theater, etc. The points that are not available in other NCRTs. Let's say, for example, you have fine arts, the 11th class NCRT, where you will find architecture mostly, sculpture and architectural traditions. You would not find that in this book. The scope of the discussion, as you can see here, is dance, music, performing arts, and all the theater, puppets, etc., the folk music, the folk dances, random names scattered here and there. You need some anchor, some kind of a logical structure to help you memorize this information. The intent of this class is to give you that logic so that it makes your life easy when you are approaching this. Language and literature of India. See, I'll firstly give you my logic of how you should perceive language as an issue, both for prelims and mains. So this is not isolated only for prelims sake. I'm trying to create a unifying, um, thesis that will combine your preparation for both GS1 as well as your approach for GS2. Language as a social issue, as a governance issue, and also as art and culture. So if I have to create a framework of language and literature as a cultural issue, it has its origin in history, but it has its implications for governance and federalism. Federalism. In society, you have this as a facet of regionalism. Okay? Can you tell me how language becomes an issue of regionalism? What is regionalism basically? Ism means it's an ideology. If you have an affection towards one region, that is regionalism. If it takes an extreme form, it becomes a political issue. Anything taken to the extreme and is curated into a political movement where you are fighting for separate statehood or sometimes in extreme cases separate nationhood, that becomes a political contentious point. It is in that kind of a context you need to recognize the importance of language, and also at different points of time in our history notice how language evolved as a cultural element. So you can trace this growth in language, or can trace the changes in the language only when you understand the literary works and the importance of the themes in that literary works. Because it's not like how NCRT has written a textbook for us. People before NCRTs, like, we didn't have a linear text. So at this point of time, the way you look at language is through language and the culture as an issue of regionalism, thereby having an implication for federalism. So it is the historical evolution of the language that we are looking at in this chapter. Okay, this is the theme that you should be focusing on. This is the larger perspective of what is expected from a bureaucrat. Okay, now enough of the logic and the entire concept. We will have to go back to the basics. You have to memorize some facts, right? How do we do that? Let's see. The art forms of dance and paintings are expressions in language without the writing tools. This is a beautiful conception here. The art forms of dance and painting are expressions in language without the writing tools. See, in this, what NCRT is essentially trying to say is, you might be thinking of language as only script. Whenever you're thinking of, let's say, Tamil as a language, what comes to your mind? Immediately, some facets of culture come to your mind. What are those facets? See, I just mentioned the word Tamil. If you think about the art and culture syllabus, what comes to your mind? Just list it down. Temples. This is the first thing that came to your mind. Does language and temple have anything in common? Both of them are just different tools to express the same underlying value. Okay? Whether it is art, whether it is, when I say art, it can be painting, it can be music, it can be sculpture, it can be literature, anything. Is just a human being's endeavor to express what is important to them. Value means what is important to us. Why did the ancient kings construct those monuments? You have to understand this, right? Some of you might have already been a part of this discussion on art and culture, but for the rest of them, this is a brief background on how to approach before you memorize anything. Whether we are talking about any facet of the syllabus, language, dance, literature, puppets, etc. Imagine that you are all looking at me. From that standpoint, the view is different. From that standpoint, the view is different. But you're all looking at the same thing. Similarly, no matter what art form, what cultural element we are looking at the heart of it is our effort to find out what particular society is finding as important to them. If they write about hero worship, why do they find hero worship so important in that society? Can we infer that that particular society is constantly under a threat from external forces? If you see in that poetry, glorification of the king, does it automatically imply that maybe court poets are getting enough money. There is encouragement. If you find that secular poetry is prevalent in that society, either the society is so rich that they have time to think about aesthetics like poetry, or so poor that they have anger within them, that you find that anger in the expression of that music. You often see that societies, when they're extremely prosperous or extremely poor, will come up with art as a form of expression. Anything in between, you will not find the development of art and anything that is related to culture. Nothing significant. If you are constantly under a political transformation, you would find it difficult to sustain the growth of that. Right? With this context, let us look at some important points which I think can be asked in your exam. The reason why I am picking up these specific keywords is because there is an exam called UGC NET. Are you aware of this exam? What is UGC NET? It's an exam for your after your post graduation. Okay, MPhil, PhD, those kind of exams. As far as UPSC is concerned, it often picks up questions directly from UGC NET. There are some important points which I found that UGC is picking up from these NCRTs only. If the, in the past few years, UGC was picking up, UPSC was picking up these questions from UGC like direct verbatim. 2019-20, Kulyavapa, Dronavapa, this kind of questions which are directly picked up from UGC NET. You will notice similar patterns again. And if they are coming from NCRT, definitely you will have to remember them. But these are random names, and without a context, you would not remember them. That's the reason I am giving this. Now, see, firstly, Kavad Banchana. This is the name of the oral storytelling tradition. Kavad means panel of a door, and Banchana means to narrate and show the illustrated story on the panel. This is one fact which you have to memorize. Now, before you are asked to memorize, at least if you see the options, you can recognize if the next time you are. But the common things between this singers who are, reading out from a scroll. Scroll means there is some kind of a cloth or some kind of a paper or something where you can open it, something is engraved on it. They used to sing from that. Take a look at the location, Rajasthan. Usually, your culture influences the people around them, and that culture is actually in turn influenced by geography. If people are writing on palm leaves, it's easy to infer that they are in a region where you will find these palm leaves. When you are preparing for art and culture, I want you to look for this geographical and social clues when you are solving a question, because it is impossible for you to literally mug up everything that is out there. The bare minimum stuff that you have to do, focus on that. Don't mug up blindly. In this case, the Bhopas of Rajasthan are the fart singers who are invited to villages to sing to appease the deity. Can you see some familiarity with any recent cultural event that you can think of from popular cinema? Read this once. Read the last line and tell me. Have you seen this movie Kantara? Here, it is not exactly to appease the deed. It's a slight modification. But the common theme here is that you have literature, music as a form of appeasement or appealing to the higher consciousness or God, which is a recurring theme across our country. So, we all know the mainstream dances, mainstream, what do I say, songs, music, etc. But we are not aware of the diversity that this country has. And one recurring theme in UGC has been the importance given to this regional traditions, whether it is dance, music, or anything, paintings also, they are giving importance to this regional traditions. So the bare minimum that we can do, we can't sit and collect all the newspaper information, right? The bare minimum we have to do is whatever is there in NCRT, we shouldn't be missing them. So that's the reason I'm giving you this Kawat Banchana and Fart Singers. Basically, both are different formats of expressing what is important to them. It's a fact. But how do you remember that fact? I'm giving you the backstory. Now, take a look at this. India is a home for 5 major language families: Indo-Aryan, Dravidian, Austro-Asiatic, Tibeto-Burmese, and Semito-Hamitic. Anthropology students might remember this, others, it won't make much sense in the longer term to remember all this. But what do you mean by what characterizes a language family? Can anyone tell me? Race. What is a race? How is race linked to language? Anyone? Correct. Exactly. So you would often notice the pace of the words, the pitch of the sound, you know, and the way your expression is vocalized. Sometimes it can be a cultural shock for people from two different regions. Some people communicate very loudly. That's natural to them. For someone who is very soft spoken and very mellowed down, if both those people come together and greet each other, it would feel like a cultural shock because one might find the other person to be very timid. The other person will think he's being very rude. So, language, family, and the entire division of the language families primarily has got to do with a mixture of race, which characterizes genetics, and the other part is geography, which together determine how they vocalize their words and how they express themselves, the body language part, etc. So that is one thing that you should be remembering. Just remember that, nothing much. Here, there is an important point. Okay. Take a look at this. Bankim Chandra Chatterjee bought out a magazine, Bangladesh, to educate people on the social and political issues of the time. But before we get to this, I recently took up a discussion on how the Parliament took up a discussion on the 150 years of Vande Mataram. So, one more important point that you need to know: Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, Anand Math, the timeline of the various literary works written by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee. These are important. Take a look at the magazine, take a look at the other Bengali literary works or magazines or journals that came in the picture. So, this is a very important theme this year. Bengali magazines, journals, literary works which are there in NCRTs can be very important thing. Take a look at this. India's first newspaper, Udant Marthand, was published from Kolkata in 1826. This was a new weekly newspaper by Jugal Kishore Shukla. Random information which we will not remember usually. See, this part of information is usually prepared by most of the candidates from that Spectrum last pages appendix, if I'm not wrong. I don't know if you follow Spectrum or not, but usually the list of newspapers and the list of journals, whether they're daily, weekly, magazine, whatever language they are, which leaders are associated with that newspaper, Usually, everyone will prepare from that list, but this newspaper is missing from that list. That's the reason I came up with this specific. I'm trying to reduce your pain point by highlighting this. Udant, Udant Martand by Pandit Jugal Kishore Shukla. India's first newspaper. Then you have Kavivachan Sudha by Bharatendu Harishchandra. Usually we will forget all this part, so keep revising from now on. This part. Kavivachan Sudha by Bharatendu Harishchandra. Then you have Bengal Gazette, which is by James Augustus Hickey. You have to understand this important point. He was critical. He was critical of the British policies. James Augustus Hickey. The usual expectation is that if an Englishman is starting a newspaper, he would probably be voicing pro-British opinions. That's not the case. So, one more fact for you to remember. So, today's class is more like a session where important facts are collated and put at one place. What would usually take you like 8-9 hours, understand the story behind it, I'm trying to compress it in a single 1.5 hour. Please do it right now, write it within the class, use this class judiciously. There's nothing much to analyze, go back and read it again. Don't waste your time, okay? While you're in this class, please use this judiciously. India's first weekly. This is first weekly. This is a daily. Please understand the difference. This was a weekly newspaper. Now, take a look at this. Let's come back to the language groups. Those random facts are over. Now, let's come back to the language groups. And within that, you have Sanskrit. Here, the evolution of how Sanskrit got the due importance, how it is considered to be the mother of multiple languages, the grammatical structure, the syntax, etc., which was borrowed from Sanskrit, and how it spilled over into other languages, the interaction between the North and South. In this whole debate, whether Sanskrit is old, Tamil is old, Dravidian culture is older than the Vedic culture, these debates are ongoing. So, in the context of that, maybe the inspiration for examiner would be to test your background knowledge about Sanskrit. So, in different time periods, if you draw a historical timeline, this is how I would want you to conceptualize this. Draw a timeline. Okay, let's say this is 2500 BC, where we're talking about Indus Valley civilization. This is 2025, the present times. When you pick up a language, take a look at this. Is there any influence of Sanskrit for the first 1000 years? No. Maybe there is an increase during the early Vedic, then here, then this is how you can visualize the importance of Sanskrit in different time periods. What could be the peak? Now, this is a controversial opinion. Do you think Sanskrit peaked during the Vedic age or in the Gupta age. This is a purely opinionated question. What do you think? Why? Here it is a court language. Here it is the culture entirely. Let's say if we have to take an opinion on this, again, this is purely a opinion based question which can be used in your prelims, oh sorry, mains. Here, this is the origin part. In different time periods, let's say in Gupta age, which is considered to be the classical age of Indian culture, we see growth of literally every cultural element, including language. Here in this quote itself, you have Kalidas, who came up with multiple Sanskrit works. Can you name a few? Avijnana Shakuntalam, Malavikagnamitam, Meghadutam. List down the works of Kalidas. But if I ask you the chronology of these Sanskrit works, can you name a few works that came before Kalidas? Which year? Or roughly which century? 5th century BC. Which region? Can you name a famous poet from the Kashmir region? Sanskrit poet, anyone can you think of? Is this before Kalidas or after Kalidas? After Kalidas. Then can you think of this person? Bhasha. Which time period? Uh, which language was this book written? Who wrote this? Which time period? What is the point I'm trying to prove? Am I, just saying that you have to mug up all these points? I'm showcasing where students can go wrong. There are multiple Sanskrit works which are lying scattered in your mind. So the activity that you have to do is arrange them in a chronology. Arrange them in chronology and also kingdom. Check if the writer is a court poet or someone who's outside the court. Contemporary kings. There are two ways to look at history. One is called the Etihasa, where we are not really interested in the timelines. We are interested in the moral and the story that it teaches. If you look at the indigenous tradition of history, it's called Etihasa because, let's say, what are the Etihasas we have? Mahabharata, Ramayana. These epics, as they're called, are called Etihasa because time and again, without diluting the essence of the story, they've been passed on to generations after generations just through oral tradition. That is the original style of historical documentation for us. But this chronological documentation of history is a Western concept which we adapted. So, the so called prehistoric times, etc., we did not document it as such, but we still get to know about those times through other means like archaeology or through study of seals or through study of carbon dating mechanisms in again archaeology tools. So wherever there is no written history, wherever there is no documentation of language, where there you will see other methods of learning history. Wherever there is language, again the misconception is when you are talking about Gupta, we tend to ignore other languages which are also existing at that point of time. In order to avoid confusions, what you're supposed to do is draw a timeline, map it to the respective kingdoms, see the geographical spread. If you see examples like this from your previous year questions, which are probably unlikely if you are not highlighting it, anomaly. Why is this an anomaly here? Who wrote this? Narsimha Varman. Like, if you take a look at the etymology of the word, is it a North Indian name or a South Indian name? So, a South Indian work in Sanskrit, especially in the times of this debate between North and South, will obviously become an important work. Can you think of any other South Indian kings who wrote in Sanskrit? What is the book name? Is Amukta Malyada written in Sanskrit? Jambavati Parinayam. Can you think of another king from Maharashtra or the Karnataka region? Who is the longest ruling Rashtrakuta king? Amogavarsha. Can you tell me a book name? Is it from Sanskrit or Kannada? Kannada or Sanskrit? See, you all know the names. You're spontaneous. The minute I asked, how many years did Amogavarsha rule? How is it important for bureaucracy? But you're almost there. He ruled for 64 years. How not to read history for UPSC? Wasting your energy on dates, memorizing random names, political kingdoms. They must have established a great legacy. But that legacy, if it is relevant in present times, if it brings people together, that's when you really care about them. If they are divisive, how not to be, you will learn from them. Don't waste your energy on memorizing everything. You can, in your free time, appreciate the historical evolution of that kingdom and what they contributed individually. But in the longer run, we only care about what they contributed, what ingredient they added to the present Indian society. Every regional language took off in the Bhakti period. And whatever kingdom coincided with that Bhakti period will witness some major literary works. All you have to do is go back, check in the previous year questions some important facts, see if it is a Bhakti influence or a court influence. By doing this mental activity and putting it on a chronology map line, like timeline, and also take it on a geographical map, you will make that activity not only fun but also interesting. And whether you like it or not, you will have to memorize some names. You will have to put some names as the anchor around which you can build this logic. If you don't know that Kalidasa is from this time period and he wrote a certain number of books, you cannot use that as a point of reference before Kalidasa, after Kalidasa, because he happens to be the most important figure in Sanskrit literature. Okay, this is how you have to go about preparing literary works of every language, every major language. That too only from NCERT, whatever information we have. Nothing beyond that. See, then one area where a lot of students get confused. How do we classify history of Indian literature? The classification is given here. Vedic, classical, Prakrit, Aparabramsa, Indian language. If you have to write a mains answer about the evolution of literary tradition in India, 10 mark, what will you write? So many things will come to your mind. I'm pretty sure what you can think is, if you're coming just out of the prelims mode, you will be doing hundreds of times those prelims bits. You will obviously think of Mudra Rakshasa, Vishakadatta, Mrichakatika, Kalidasa, Malavikagnimitram, random names like this. If you're someone who just started preparation in the last few years, you will even remember latest questions. Because I can't recollect those latest facts, like whatever, whoever wrote the exam recently, you will mug up those names also and write it there. But is that what he asked? No, right? They asked, how can you classify Indian literature? What is the literary evolution? What is the classification? Unless and until we read this textbook, even I didn't know this classification existed until I read this textbook. This can be a direct question. Something that is in plain, sight, we tend to ignore because we haven't read the NCRTs. That's why NCRTs are important. Vedic, classical. What is? Look at the classification here. What do you mean by uh, classical literature till 5th century BC? So within that you have Sanskrit, Pali, Prakrit, and Tamil. So whenever Sanskrit is a court language, you will also have to see the status of Prakrit, Pali, and in case of South India, Tamil. In South India, you will have to see, for example, if you're talking about the Sangam age, by default, Tamil is the major language. What you have to see is flip it. See if Sanskrit was also existing in South. I'm not asking you to remember information. I'm teaching you how to organize that information, on what logic you should organize that information. Right? Now, Aparabramsa from the 7th century to 18th century. 18th century. So, here you will see this movement, the growth of the literary movement coinciding with Bhakti. See, there is also a previous year question on these lines. Bhakti is linked to language tradition. Can you tell me why? Communicate what? Exactly. So the theme here is making religion accessible to the masses. It is easy to communicate. Now you will know why Aparabramsa literature grew in this time period. Why not before that? See, every part of the society would want to feel like they're a part of that society. They would want progress in life. Before this, it was offered by Buddhism, Jainism, or the other Shramanic traditions, as they are called. Shramanic traditions. These Shramanic traditions emphasized on uh, the unorthodox ways, like they moved away from Vedas. See, here again there is a misinterpretation of Vedas. At this point of time, if you go back to the earliest intent of Vedas, it was not about withholding that knowledge only to a small section of people. It was about spreading that knowledge under a very strict regimen, like strict discipline. Because if you don't use that knowledge in a proper channelized manner, we would end up misutilizing it. It's like I read one interpretation of this way long back, like an analogy was given. I found it very interesting. It stuck to my mind. I'm passing on the same analogy. If Oppenheimer didn't have access, this debate was in the context of the movie Oppenheimer, where uh, many people misquoted the intent of Bhagavad Gita, where Oppenheimer, he was quoting Bhagavad Gita. So someone who created an atom bomb just because of the platform that he got or the attention that he got because of his atom bomb discovery or invention. People often misquote Bhagavad Gita and Vedic traditions to destruction. Yes, Vedas did talk about destruction. If the knowledge falls into wrong hands, the consequences will be very bad. So, if you take a look at the Vedantic thought, Vedant, so towards the end of the Vedas, the Upanishads, etc., which try to explain the philosophy of Vedas, they speak about how you have to control all your senses, etc., to understand the intent of those Vedas. So that is the reason why they were restricted only to people who exhibited certain qualities. So in this context, both Varna system as well as the caste system, Varna was not something that you were born into. It is a status that you achieve by displaying some qualities. That was transformed into a very rigid social hierarchy called caste. The knowledge which was supposed to be achieved or earned became a regimented system which is blocked away from other sections of the society. It is in that context Sanskrit was treated as an elite language. You will notice in this context only the phenomenon of Sanskritization in your anthropology, where the so-called lower sections of the society try to imitate the lifestyle of the upper sections in a bid to earn that social mobility. It is in this context Sanskrit gained so much importance. To move away from those traditions, Buddhism and Jainism came as alternatives, but ended up eventually becoming the same old, set of problems that the rigid later Vedic age traditions gave rise to. It is in this context Adi Shankaracharya and other subsequent Sufi saints, Bhakti saints, all of them created a sort of a social revolution, trying to democratize the access of this knowledge. Original Rigvedic thought restrained only some parts of the knowledge to everyone, but the rest of the other parts are more like universal ethical systems on how a human being should live. That is essentially what Buddhism is. That is essentially what Jainism is. How can you live your life so that you don't cause pain for others, you don't cause pain for yourself? Take a look at all the traditions of our philosophy. What is the ultimate aim? We say nirvana, kaivalya, moksha, different names, but end destination is to give up everything. So the beauty of this tradition is that we are trying to teach the concept of sustainable development before it is mainstream, before the Brundtland report gave that idea to the world in 87. What is sustainable development? An idea where the way of living of the present times should not impact the future generations, which is exactly what the idea of law of karma is. It's like a social restraint on, using your resources without any fear. There is some kind of a restraint, some kind of an order created within our behavioral systems so that we don't breach that so-called ecological limit. I'm just contextualizing it for the present times. When that rule is ignored, when it is trying to restrict that knowledge to the masses, Buddhism and Jainism came in that context. When they also became either difficult to access, like Jainism was very difficult to follow, Buddhism became the same old, kind of a problem that Brahmanical traditions in the initial stages. That is when Bhakti tried to transform that. In that Bhakti period, you will see the growth of these languages. So whatever language that you see here will be important. So whenever you are reading any random information in the future, understand the concept here, how the language evolved. So when you're reading the options, think of the story. If you are seeing that Sanskrit and Prakrit coexist, it is a possibility. Don't say it is false. Sanskrit and Pali coexisted. It can be possible. Clear? Now, one more point. Just because we're talking about language, the Bhakti period language became a sort of a literary revolution which spread into different parts of the country. You saw the growth of Marathi, Bengali, Telugu, Kannada. Tamil was anyway there. Odia, Gujarati. These regional languages, of course, Hindi. Hindi is a fairly recent literary tradition, I would say. It's an amalgamation of the many dialects and many languages there. People used to call it Hindustani or Hindi. We'll get back to that. So these regional influences of language eventually in the 19th century, from 7th to 12th, whatever language democratization happened, whatever literary works were written at that point of time became the base for 19th century socio-religious reforms. What began in 7th century ultimately culminated into the socio-religious reforms of the 19th century and then led to whatever we think are the values of our constitution. And that is how you trace the evolution of language in our history. Okay, so please don't forget these interconnections when you are preparing for these specific points. I am telling this logic because it's not easy to think on the spot if you don't have this orientation. You will either give up or not even attempt that question because you did not see this fact. It's important to have this orientation, that's why. Now, there is this person called in contemporary India. What I would want you to know is there are many Indians who were getting support from the British. In the previous year questions, if you see, or also the UGC net or Hindu newspaper discussions, there is often a mention of this person called Michael Madhusudan Dutt. Please read about this person from Wikipedia. Okay. Eventually, the point that you need to focus is here. Initially, he was reading about Indian culture, but then he got an aversion for Indian culture and became influenced by the British. It's obvious because the British are sponsoring and the orientation is pro-British. Over a period of time, often in policy circles, Mr. Michael Madhusudan Dutt is often quoted as how lack of patronage can hijack intellectual movements. The importance of the state to often promote scientific thinking in mother tongue, three language policy. In that kind of debates also he's often quoted. So one more important fact, great grandson is Mr. Leander Pace, who's the tennis player. Just random fact, which is not important. But anyway, so you will see the Indian writers like Henry Viven Derozio and Michael Madhusudan Dutt, who were prominent. Several Indian language writers were not only proficient in regional languages, they also wrote in English. So in that context, you will have to know this. Then again, contemporary writers like this, Vikram Sheth, Ruskin Bond, they also derived inspiration from Indians, right? So that's an important point. Now, when it comes to this, PIB information, the concept of classical language status. Let me help you understand this classical language. What is classical language? The technical definition given by our Ministry of Culture is that, take a look at this. Yeah. High antiquity of its early texts, 1500 to 2000 year old texts. If a language has reference of materials from almost 2000 years ago, you can use this as a criteria. Point number one. Body of ancient literature text which is considered a heritage by generations of speaker. Okay. Then knowledge texts, especially prose texts in addition to poetry, epigraphical and inscriptional evidence. Both poetry and prose. And one more thing is, if you read Hindi, or sorry, if you read Telugu, if your mother tongue is Telugu, or if you read any very old format of the language, they're very distinct from the present times. If you are talking about the vernacular language of Telugu, you would notice that there's something called Grandhika Bhasha. Grandhika means something that has got to do with literary tradition. It's not colloquial. It's not like the way you and I speak in our day-to-day life. If you have a significant body of literature in that textual tradition, which is distinct from its current form, that is also one criteria for language as a classical status. Till now, we have had these languages. After last year's announcement, we have these also in our classical language status. What is the implication here? You will officially get some decent amount of institutional support for growth of these languages and to do more research so that our identity and our culture is not lost. Okay, so the takeaway is you should remember the list of these languages, or whatever you think is an anomaly, like you didn't expect that it will be part of the classical language. What is the first classical language? Is Sanskrit the classical language? Which is the first one? Why not Sanskrit? Why Tamil? Look, take a look at the time period when it was announced. 2000? Just not related to the subject. Just go back and see who formed the government then. Take a look at this date. October 12th. Somebody must have formed the government then. Who are a part of the coalition politics? How many of them are from Tamil Nadu? Just have a look once. Who is representing Sanskrit? Any state? And they found the place for that also. Anyway. See, this is a direct topic. What steps have been taken to promote classical languages? GS1 direct question is possible. So please read it from here. This PIB article. Now, the quick summary, I don't think you will have to go through all. So I'll give you this notes. You can directly by heart. I have taken this from NCERT. Some points like the Sangam age literature, etc. I've picked it up from Tamil Nadu SCRT also and added it here. You can take it from me after some point of time. Now tell me, how many of you thought it was Sanskrit? Kaviraja Marga. Kannada and Karnataka, basically. See, it's not because Kannada is gaining traction because of the linguistic nationalism, etc. Take a look at how UPSC asks questions. Why do you think Tamil Nadu textbook is prescribed? Why? Why only Tamil Nadu? You know about Chola, Pandya, Chera. How many of you know about, how many of Telugu UPSC aspirants know about their own culture? Not many. From Satavahana, you directly come to Kakatiya. What happened in between? After Kakatiya, your awareness of history vaporizes unless you prepared for state services. Same is the case for Karnataka. Can you tell me the chronology of Karnataka kingdoms? Where will you start? You are from Karnataka, right? Can you tell me? Okay, tell me the broad kingdoms that you know. Vijayanagara, 13th century. What happened before that? Kadamba. See, I'm not trying to pick up people like you guys. If questions are not asked, we won't study. I know that. But whatever, tell me some famous UNESCO sites in Karnataka. Hampi. Okay, let's list them down. Let's do one thing. Hampi. Yes. What else? Badami. Pattadikal. Aihole. What else? What are those temples? What else? Over. Next, Vijayanagara. What happened after Vijayanagara? Mysore. Then British. This is the situation of Karnataka. Now let's take a look at Kerala. Completely clueless. Only one name. Go back to ancient history. This is BC time. This is what time? Let's say you know only this in the context of princely state. What happened in between? Are you not forgetting some important event? What is the name of the king? Zamorin. Okay. One more point from Kerala. Over. That's all. Gone. Now let's move to some other state. Let's take a look at Gujarat. How many do you know? Gurjara Pratiharas. Okay. Because the name Gujarat. Next. Solanki. Gaikwad. Basically Marathas. Khatam. Kashmir. Kashmir. Assam. Only one. Don't you think it's unfair that we don't know our own culture? Despite those, significant contributions to the Indian culture. Can you tell me West Bengal region names? Everything from Mahajanpadas is related to Bengal region, Magadha. In fact, the tragedy of Bengal is that it was supposed to be the next Shanghai if it were not for the economic policies in the 80s. If you take a look back at the history, Bengal is the most. What is the capital of Magadhan kingdom? Pataliputra. What is it today? What is the status of Patna? It's the state capital of the India's poorest, one of the poorest country or poorest state, with a per capita income 50% of that. How did it come down to that? Are you curious? If you trace the slow degeneration of the culture, the economy, and the way that society digressed from the path of development, you will have your answers. So the way UPSC picks up questions is on that journey of your understanding towards any state. Why did it become the way it is? There are some milestones for every history. They will pick up those milestones as the anchors for creating questions. Yes, traditional questions from the previous year questions, everybody answered them. But you should at least know the bare minimum thing, right? From different states. Paika rebellion, where will you find it? Who are Pikes? No idea. Who is Surendra Sai? I'll give one simple activity. Go to Wikipedia, search for the list of airports in this country. Look at every state airport. Who are they named after? You will get some important anchor point. Who is Kempegowda? Who is Basavanna? What is the name of Mumbai airport? Then why aren't we aware of others? Do you think you know who is Surendra Sai? That's the problem. Azadi Ki Amrit Mahotsav, 75 years of independence, when they came up with this. Tribal fighters like uh, Surendra Sai and Rani Gaindinlu. Where is she from? Rani Gaindinlu is from Nagaland. See, it's just that we don't know our history well enough. And UPSC is trying to at least make sure that you are knowing some parts of the history. You're, of course, not going in depth for every state history. So, my expectation is that next points would be towards the northeast, Ahom Kingdom. I've been waiting for a question to pop up. In that context, you should know something called a term called Burunjis, which is classical work on the Ahom Kingdom. Please note this term. You might get a question. Similarly, in current affairs in the past 5 years, you are witnessing Kashmir region, Kashmir kings, a chronology of the Kashmir kings, and within them, you will have a reference of a famous person called Lal Ded, Women King. Please note this name. Okay, so that's why language has such high importance. And yeah, Lal Ded and Habba Khatun. See, in the subsequent class, I will finish the rest of the topics of this chapter and I will also pick up some important newspaper articles. So, what is the takeaway from today's class? You have to arrange your literary works in a specific chronology, map them to different kingdoms, know the regional histories, important kings of every state, like their literary contribution. How many of you are from Andhra Pradesh here? Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka region. Basically, Krishna Devaraya is not just confined to this because of the previous year question's significance. You know, he's called Andhra Bhoja. Who is Bhoja in the first place? Who is Bhoja? He's called Andhra Bhoja. He's more famous than the. Where do you find Bhoj wetland? Where in Madhya Pradesh? Bhopal. See, you have to link geography, etymology, the origin of the word. You have to be curious and you have to think like you are on a puzzle hunt, like treasure hunt when you are solving prelims questions. The clue will always be within the question and you will be able to solve that question with the information that you picked up from your standard resources. And if you have that mindset, It will be very interesting. But before that, I'll briefly summarize one more point so that uh, it will be easy for you. So I just wanted to finish this part. Yeah. Whenever you're preparing for important art forms, dance, music, etc., I'll just give you a brief outline. We'll come back again tomorrow or whenever is the next class and relook at this. Always understand that we have, whether it is music or dance, you have two broad categories: traditional and folk. This is rule bound, and this is emotion bound. Okay? There is no one universal emotion that is celebrated. Art is a mechanism of expressing ourselves. I'll give you a random word. What comes to your mind? Just tell me. What is this? Any idea? Not ghatak, ghatka. Dance. What kind of dance? What is this? Is it a dance? What about this? It's sort of a martial dance which is performed by martial groups. Your geography determines how you express yourself. On the border areas, whatever art form you find, like if you see, there will be two broad themes. They will use humor and sarcasm as a coping mechanism because on the borders you will constantly find a lot of distress from your neighboring states. Northwest areas, because of the passages in the mountains, they became major points of contention. And in those areas, you will either find that the dance forms or the art forms, puppets or etc., they'll use humor and sarcasm to cope with the stress. Wherever you will see plain regions like Ganga plains, the plains, delta regions of Krishna, Godavari, Kaveri, you will see affluence, rich pomp, and very vibrant, loud, vibrant, noisy, or not noisy exactly, like very happy, eventful culture. Why is that? Because there is affluence there. They want to celebrate and spend that money in celebrating something larger than life. The same kind of expression in the modern day moved to cinema, so much so that they went on to become politicians. Like the kind of cult following you have in the southern states, you don't find that in the northern part of the country. Even though the geographical conditions are maybe somewhat similar. Why do you think that's the case? Did you ever wonder? You see regional movie stars going on to become, political transformation, like the kind of political transformation they bring to the table in that respective state. Right from Tamil Nadu, you have Karunanidhi, MGR. Um, of late, you have the superstar Vijay. Here in Telugu states, you have NTR, now Pawan Kalyan, all these are movie stars. They're so deeply attached to their fan clubs, etc. Like they're almost worshipped. and that larger than life image will eventually become sort of a social responsibility. Why is this phenomenon happening? What is it telling us about the culture in the southern states? You got to think about this. But the reason why I wanted you to think in these lines is because whenever you are reading a theme, let's say here in this case, take a look at this Kalbelia in Rajasthan, performed by the Kalbelia community in Thar Desert. They wear flowing skirts and use instruments like percussion and pungi, which is a wind instrument. I'll, yeah, take a look at this. Rauf, Kashmir. You will see traditional music and dance performed by women. Like there will be one question posed by one woman and the answer will be given. Like it's like a dialogue, and it's like a very playful, you know, uh, community-based exchange. Primarily because they are trying to cope with that stress, daily life stress. Wherever women are involved, it is more about community engagement. Wherever men in the bordering areas are involved, it's got humor as a element, sarcasm and humor, because they're showcasing their life basically. Yeah, that's pretty much it. We will see the rest of the issues in the next class. The takeaway before you come to the class is understand that geography, society, and culture, the location determines how their art form is expressed, the material they use, the theme of that artistic expression, etc. I hope I didn't bore you much, but I hope you got enough direction to think on these lines. Yeah, that's it for the day. Thank you.